Welcome to Not Suitable for Democracy. I'm your host, Nick, and today is the second installment from last week's episode where we were talking about where do we go from here. A lot has been happening since September 10th, 2025, but we know that our only way to rise above is to come together. Now, with the direction of what's been happening, obviously tensions are heating up. It's going to take a long time before things cool down. But again, we see it in those in power where our leaders are failing us. Now, we know that between the rhetoric, the messaging, and the consolidation of power, we're seeing that play out on the Republican side with conservatives and their MAGA movement, and it's not going well for our country. It's not. Point blank. If the movement was always about love, acceptance, dignity, safety, compassion, empathy, those would all be great things that every American would want to get behind. But we're not seeing that. Now, conversely, we know the Democratic side wants to virtue signal about those things, but we know that a lot of what they do isn't rooted in those values either. They can't really be saying, they're all about compassion and empathy when they really don't have good foreign policy or they really haven't done well with our criminal justice system, right? And that's the Democrats, I mean. So where do we go from here? Well, like I said, if we can just take that extra time to sharpen those skills around empathy and listening, we can come from a better place of understanding. That's the first thing. And to be frank, there will be people in the world, especially in America, who will never agree with you, who will never want to be on your same side, and will never want to make things better because they feel like if they change for you, then that zero-sum equation means that they're going to be slighted or worse off. But that's not true. Politics is not always a zero-sum game. When we want everyone to be taken care of and loved, protected, and if not thrive and be successful, right? We can do that. But we also live in a time when people are very entitled. They definitely all want to be heard and validated. And when we have the proliferation of social media and the virality of content, good or bad, it does not help when trying to disseminate a common level of understanding when there's no way to really control the message with the audience and how we're all supposed to feel or consume that content, feel about consuming that content. So in the last episode, I did mention, what are some things we can do? Well, first off, we know that there is a level of doxing going on. If people feel a different type of way than conservatives, then there's been over 20,000 submissions from conservatives, taking, screenshots or just links or whatever of people on the internet of who they disagree with, right? And again, if we know that no one should be harmed for their political point of view, well, doxing someone, which is basically, getting them fired from their job to take away their resource of money, security, stability, which is even sometimes healthcare benefits, right? 401k, that kind of stuff. Like, if people are looking to take that away from people, well, that's not any better than what originally happened. It's not. So until there's a concerted effort to treat more people with dignity and respect, will that ever change? But unfortunately, we're not seeing it from the top. We're not seeing it from the Trump administration. We're not seeing it for the people who support him, right? Both elected officials and voters. We're not. So until there's a concerted effort with actual unity, with actual compassion and empathy, with actual policy behind it, right? That uplifts all boats, uplifts everyone, then we can start to make progress. But until then, here's some things that we got to do to protect ourselves. Number one, Sometimes you're better off just not saying anything at all, whether it's online or with your friends and family, neighbors, whoever. Just sometimes political opinions, just keep them to yourselves. Now, if you want to say what you have to say, nothing wrong with that. I would encourage you to make sure you're in a safe space. And what I mean, what's a safe space? I don't mean like a brick building, but I literally mean like people around you that you can trust. Trust that they're not going to try to dox you. Trust that they're not going to, go behind your back and say horrible, mean things that would probably offend you if they said it to your face. People that aren't going to try to, harm you in some way. Because then they could tell someone who tells someone who tells someone who then does something bad. Or, like the list goes on. But I guess the point being is make sure you're talking in your circles with people you can trust. In addition, you might want to invest in mental healthcare. If you know of a good therapist or if you know of any good resources or groups, like one-on-one sessions, group therapy, right? This would be a great way to really get involved on checking your mental health in a good way, just getting a nice read, being like, how am I feeling these days? Am I thriving? Am I set up for success? Can I get through this with everything going on? Times are scary, times are unpredictable, so investing in mental health is definitely good. But in addition, we also know that if you are making the effort to go to a therapist or see someone, whatever, then that should help you should someone try to take away your livelihood or dox you or something maybe a little more nefarious. I hate to say it. At least then you have a record of saying, hey, at least you're trying. At least you're trying to take care of yourself because the world around us is not in a great place. But you're doing your part to be better. In addition, right? Now, we know, like, for example, we know the MAGA hats, the red hats. For some people, it means something very good. For others, it means something very bad. But at the end of the day, like, as much as like an article of clothing shouldn't trigger someone, we know that it could. So I would just recommend think twice in terms of what you say, what you wear, where you go even. Because there is that charged energy out there that doesn't know how to necessarily control their own feelings of anger, resentment, right? People who don't look or feel or think like them, they might not treat you the same way you want to be treated. I'll put it that way. So just think twice, but be careful, right? So in that sense, make sure you text a loved one or a close friend or someone you trust about your whereabouts. Hey, I'm going to be like, if you're going out with friends, like, hey, I'll see you at this spot at this time. Just so then it's documented on your phone somewhere, like where you were headed and who you're supposed to meet, right? Or if like you're going out, but someone you're with is still at home, they at least knew, okay, they were supposed to be there at this time, meeting these people in this venue. So then there's at least a record, right? Because again, things happen. And we live in a world now where we have to really be careful who we connect with, where we go, right? And then on top of that, right, what else can we do? I would recommend you create a list, whether you write it down physically, pen and paper, or mentally in your head. I don't recommend digitally typing it. And the point being is this list is supposed to be a list of people that you trust in your life that should anything happen, you can count on them, right? So like a safety guide, essentially. People that you know that if you think they're going to come visit you in the hospital, or you think that if they could spare a few extra bucks if you're in a pinch, right? Just people who are, I don't want to say give you something, it's not about that. It's about who's there to like care for your well-being in a supportive way. Even if it's a shoulder to cry on, that's the level of care I'm talking about. Create that list, mentally write it down. I don't recommend putting it in a desktop or a mobile device Because should that desktop or mobile device fall into the wrong hands, right? And then these people know, ooh, look at this list of people. That's just their next list of people they might want to harm. So I strongly recommend you definitely think about people you care about and trust. And maybe your friends will do the same exercise, right? People in your life that say, you know what, I want to be there for this group of people. I want to make sure I'm there for them. Like, this is the time to start doing that. I know it's wild to say. I know it's not everyone's top of mind. But we do live in a world now where, like, a lot of us have targets on our back. I know I do, just by being openly gay in America. Because there's another group of people who want me to disappear. I'll say it that way. So I can just do whatever I can to inform, educate, bring people together, share advice, talk about politics, right? Like, that's all I want to do. But even that is too much for people. So, we all got to just really think about, before we get heated or charged or angry, think before you speak, pause, really consider the consequences or ramifications of what you put out there, whether it's on a digital format like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, X, whatever, or even if it's with a group of people at a party, at work, at some venue where there's multiple people, and you might not know how they're thinking or feeling, right? So it's like, it is a little bit of self-censorship. And it's not to say that we should be silent, but it is to say that we must be cautious about what we say, because the consequences could be dire. So with all of that said, right, if there are any advice or pieces of information that you have heard, let me know. Share on Instagram. You can follow me at NSFD_pod. Let me know in the comments on YouTube, right? Something that maybe you found helpful or something that's been positive. That would be a great way to then more people can learn. Hopefully, it's sharing information in a good way, constructive way. Like, we know, like, there's a lot of misinformation in the world and fake news. And I don't mean fake news being like, oh, I disagree, so it's fake news. It's like, no, like, actual unverified, unscientific, not real content out there that then people try to pass off as real. Like, that is true fake news. But we can only do what we can to really control what we consume and what we put out there in the world, and how we feel about the content in this era of information overload. So with all that said, I hope everyone, the takeaway being, just be shrewd, be smart, be careful, think about people you trust, right? That will help guide us, and that will at least start to give us the safety nets that we need should anything bad happen. Now, on top of that, right, like, that's just on a very more personal level, but think about your community. Now would also be a good time. Think about nonprofits or local groups or organizations that are doing this work to bring people together, to inform them about the political process, or even something more social. Maybe it's something where you like to draw, so you take art classes, or you want to meet new people and you want to just, kind of let that energy out. Take a Zumba class, right? Or if it's like, hey, you know what? It's a sunny afternoon. I want to just hang out in the park with some friends. Keep it very casual. But putting ourselves into these group spaces, right? That will also break the system, because what we are doing is putting ourselves out into the world. And, like, sure, you can put it on your phone, like, record it and create content out of it if you want, fine. But the point is to be off our devices. We can connect on our devices for sure, but that human-to-human interaction in person, in the real world, that is something magical that you can never recreate on a phone. Ever. And unfortunately, a lot of these online communities, as much as it connects us to, like, hundreds, thousands, if not millions of more people we would have never met otherwise. Those types of interactions are so two-dimensional, right? And sure, you can film a video and you can see how someone's interacting, but it's still very different than being in person. And the sad part, some of those online communities venture into the very dark corners of the internet. And what are they organizing around? If it was good, it wouldn't be so dark, right? That's why I'm saying we need to go out, meet people, connect person to person in the real world, not on your phone, not on social media platforms, literally just in person. Because that way, when you're connected to someone, like think about Facebook, right? If you don't like what they say, boop, click of a button, you unfriend them, and then you never have to connect with that person ever again. But that's not real life. If you're truly looking to create a better world, you can't just, you can ignore someone. And you can give them the silent treatment. But socially, it would be weird, right? So you want to be able to connect with people, talk to them, engage, learn from each other. Even if it's stuff you would probably disagree about, listen. Doesn't mean you have to fight them on it. Doesn't mean you have to force your opinion on them. Share your point of view, but then walk away, right? Because what we're seeing on the other side is that they all have a very particular point of view. And if your point of view is different than theirs, they come after you. So that's why if the rest of us can all connect, meet new people, build trust within community, we can fight back. We can combat that. I shouldn't even say the word fight because it's not about fighting. It's about connecting and organizing. That's what we do. When we have that empathy and that level of understanding to treat each other with dignity and respect, that other side won't win. Those people cannot win if we are still connected. President Trump's divide and conquer strategy that he's been doing since 2016 has clearly shaped the electorate in such a way that we are less trustful of the people around us than we may have been even 10 years ago. President Barack Obama was more of a unifier than President Trump. That's just a fact. Through his messaging, his rhetoric, and whatnot. Now, granted, people feel very differently about that, but what I can say is that when you have the President of the United States, Donald Trump, talking about, they're eating cats and dogs, right? Saying inflammatory, gross, very weird things, and then that side is confused. Why are people angry with each other? Why are people not trusting of each other? Why are people so, disorganized and not coming together? The messaging and the rhetoric. Look at the source. President Trump is not a unifier. We know that. We see that he doesn't want to unify. It's always been about divide and conquer. So if we can connect and stay together, trust one another, be a little more open, right? But also cautious, because not everyone will have your best interests out there. I know there are people who don't want me to exist on this planet because of how they feel with their wrong opinions. But the best thing I can do, maybe not be friends with them, but make new friends with people around them. Like I said, go to the park, join a class, join a club, do something where you're in person with people, connecting. Because when we come together, that's how we unify. And that's when we have strength in numbers. Because without those digital communities and the dark webs and the internet, they've got nothing. If their connection is vital on a power source like electricity, you cut the cord and then where do they go? Then they're all disconnected. They have no connection in their infrastructure because by that point, how are they connected? Sure, you could say social media, you could say their phones, but they're going to technically be all spread out around the country. Whereas the rest of us, we're in the streets, we're at every community event, right? We're doing what we can. I need to get better at that. I need to put myself out there even more. Because I realize, again, the only way we combat this dark movement that's rising through harm, the rest of us need to lead with our best foot forward, come together from a place of understanding, and build community. Because if we can do that, they've got nothing on us. I'd also like to share that it's definitely going to get harder before it gets better. And I know that's not something everyone wants to hear. But the fact that generations before us have gone through darker periods of history, technically they have. We're still building on that progress, but that's only because we stayed committed to fighting for that progress. We know that there are midterm elections in 2026. There's a presidential election in 2028. We don't know what's going to happen. But what we do know, at least what I know, I'm going to be participating in the electoral process, in the political process, organizing, volunteering, making more podcasts to tell people about what's going on and issues that may be affecting your everyday life. That's what we can be doing, making those connections, informing people in person or online, right? I think between then and now, there's going to be a lot of discussions. But what I would also caution folks online is that there's going to be times where people feel charged, heightened, more angsty, and need to release. Best example in 2020, we saw there was a huge release outcry coming through a lot of political movements, and that moved our country forward. But we also know is that through those charged moments, it gets very uncomfortable for everyone because it's like growing pains, right? How do we get more accustomed to the new culture, the new vision, the new way of thinking? But we also must do our best and be content if not everyone is on board in those moments of struggle. We have to acknowledge it and we have to be real about it, because as much as we want to say we're presented with new information and we need to learn quickly, points of view are not created in seconds. They're usually created in years. Like shaping people's perspectives and experiences, like that comes through just living our lives. And we internalize that in our belief system or morals or values and what jobs we apply for and what friends we make and what activities we do, what passions we have, right? So if someone is presented with new information based on these movements or these in these moments of charged feelings trying to push for progress, right? We have to be content if someone is resistant at first. My journey as a political organizer, I was not always progressive. And I'm not ashamed of that because I learned over time. Now, I will say that there's a lot of purity tests, political purity. That's the litmus test where I would have failed years ago because I didn't check all the boxes. I had a different point of view. I had different life experiences that informed my way of thinking. And yeah, people are going to criticize that and whatnot, but that's okay. I don't mind if they do because I believe in their right to criticize on my own political journey. And it's not perfect. I'm not saying it was. But what is perfect, I will say, is that I took some time to learn and follow through. It was not easy having a paradigm shift of values, especially politically. But I knew in my heart of hearts, that's what I felt most comfortable with. It was uncomfortable to make that shift, but I knew I would be comfortable once I worked through that. And it took time. But again, it took a lot of people planting the seed, people in my life planting the seeds, so I heard it. Having a good network, people I felt comfortable with and safe around. So then when the time came for me to really think about that realignment of values, it took time, but I learned, I grew. Those growing pains are tough, but I came out the other side a better organizer. I'd like to say better human being. I'd like to say it's improved my quality of life. And I know that progressive Democrats, or even Democratic Socialists, right? A lot of people get a bad rep. So it's like, why would you want to evolve and associate yourself with a group that doesn't have the best reputation from people out there? But again, that's from misinformation being spread and people who are scared because they don't know. Well, I've done the homework. I've done it. Joined these groups, learned, organized. And I can tell you it's not that scary. It's not. There's nothing wrong with fighting or believing that every human in America deserves a dignified life. I have no problem with that. So once you start to learn and read and understand and educate, inform yourself around the policies that are anchored in whether it's democratic socialism, progressivism, economic populism, right? Just a different point of view for some people out there. You'll be doing yourself a favor and you'll be part of the solution to truly moving our country in a direction that's better for everyone. Maybe not the billionaires, maybe not the oligarchy, maybe not these corrupt, narcissistic leaders, but the rest of us, strength in numbers. There's more of us than there are of them, and that's how we can make a difference. So if you like what you heard and you want to learn more, make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy. You can find Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. If you want to follow along and connect, you can find me on Instagram at NSFD_pod. I appreciate the time you took to enjoy this podcast. This was part 2 of episode 18, so like episode 19, basically episode 19. And hey, listen, I've been doing this since April of 2025, almost every week, putting out episodes, really listening to what's been going on the ground here in New York City, watching what's happening around the country. We've got elections in 2026. We've got general election November 4th, 2025. So make sure you're registered to vote, especially for Mayor Mamdani. We're going to vote for Zohran Mamdani to become mayor of New York City. There's a lot to stay informed and be in the know about. Next week, we'll make sure to get more into the swing of our typical news cycle. I know this 2-part episode installment was really just trying to put us back on the right track, right? So again, if we're going to build community, that's how we get out of this. We need to put ourselves out there in the real world, not just online. But that's the solution, right? So I hope you enjoy this podcast. I hope you follow some of this advice. I love it if you could share it with a friend, share the podcast with a friend, or just ask someone, say, hey, do you want to hang out? Do you want to join a club, join a group, start your own? And again, the more we do in person, connecting and building community in the real world, that is how we can come together and be our safety net for what may be coming in the future. And remember, democracy is not suitable without you.